Amanda, I am so loving this show. You do such a phenomenal job of actually occupying Elizabeth Holmes' body and her psyche. And I know that you consumed everything that was out there about this woman. Tell me first how you prepared for the role.
Well, I started studying those deposition tapes because when you have that many hours of footage of somebody static with one camera just staring at them, you don't miss a thing. I mean, we have all that footage when she's doing her TED Talk and when she's on stage with Maria Shriver for the Vanity Fair thing. And there's just so many interviews, but there's something so like rich in those deposition hours that you couldn't get in her performative from her performative presence. So that was like the thing I did most. And I talked to a lot of people, but Liz Merriweather, who created it, spoke to, she was an investigative journalist. I mean, she spoke to everybody who was quoted in the book and in the podcast. I got to take this tortoise out of here. He's so
okay.
loud.
Oh,
Just
no.
walk around, sir. Check this guy out. How cute is he?
Aw.
He's just digging. He just wants to get out because it's like spring for him.
Wait, you have a tortoise in your room?
In the barn. Yeah, he lives in the barn. He has his own space. He's small, but he needs a lot of space.
I have to say, Amanda, this is a first for me. Show us your tortoise.
Oh, really? Yeah, you've never really? This is Frankie.
Oh,
Frankie,
hi, Frankie.
Been resexed. I thought he was a boy. The vet finally said, no, this is a lady, but it doesn't matter. She's just as special as she was a year ago.
Aw.
I don't know how old she is, but whatever.
She's cute.
She's really nice.
Kids like playing with Frankie?
Yeah, because there's nothing to it really. They're not gonna like touch her because they're too big. So like I have to be careful with my youngest.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We should explain, by the way, where you are right now, where we're doing this podcast.
Yeah, so we are thousands of miles apart. I am upstate at my main residence before I have to go back into the grind of the city, New York City, which is 2 hours away. And I do as much as I can from here. Why not?
Why not? And did you guys sort of take up residence there during the pandemic, or were you always pretty much living most of your life, or as much as you possibly could there?
This was way before the pandemic. We just we happened to already live full time, and my daughter already was in school up here, so it was kind of everybody seemed to join us during the pandemic. So our life was already kind of settled. So it's not like we missed anything when we didn't like move up here during the pandemic and miss the city. I never missed the city.
You're a country girl?
Yeah, but I was I grew up in suburbia. I don't know what it is. I think it's just control over a space, maybe, that I didn't have growing up. I love.
Well, let's get back to Elizabeth, because I was wondering, Amanda, with the deposition tapes, if you saw a different Elizabeth Holmes. As you said, it wasn't as performative as, she was in most arenas. But I really enjoyed watching you acting as her during the deposition without the red lipstick, kind of much more vulnerable. But tell me about the differences between how she appeared there versus so many of the other things that you watched.
There's an innate defensiveness when you're being questioned, when your choices are being questioned, and I think part of what was so fascinating was that I still feel like there was a part of her that might have been playing a part, I tried to imagine myself in that position, and I'm always, my first prerogative is to make sure that people feel comfortable with me and that I'm not making anyone uncomfortable. And I'll tell the truth and I'll say everything. I'll give all the information that I can give. And I wondered what I'd be like in that position. And so I thought, I could be totally wrong because I'm not in her head and I never got to speak to her about this, but I do feel like there was still some maneuvering she was doing. I mean, she was still negotiating her way around the questions, and it's also a legal environment. I mean, she's got her lawyers and she's got these prosecutors, and I just imagine it was just really tricky for her. So watching her negotiate her way around the questions and her own whatever she might have been feeling, and the defensiveness that comes along with it for anybody, it's just like, it was just rich and uncomfortable. And there were just so many hours worth that I could just soak it in every day, watching something new. I mean, I could practically quote it because I had 2.5 months to, prepare. But that was the stuff that really came to be most helpful.
Because you felt like you got to know her in a different way. And during the deposition, did she cast aside some of these affectations that she adopted in order to move in the world that she was trying to be successful in? In other words, did her voice, did it change a little bit? And was it kind of baritone-ish when she was doing the deposition?
That is really good. It's a real feat to get that low for me. Like, I don't, like, you have a pretty average sitting, female. I mean, I guess you could go either way. Like, you're pretty in the middle.
I don't know. I think I have a pretty low voice.
I guess maybe. I would love to know what your measurement is. There's a measurement and I don't remember if it's like frequency, decibels. I don't know what it is, but someone told me that, and a body language expert told me that Elizabeth, at her deepest, she was at like a 180 something, and I sit at a 233. And apparently, like 230 is an average female, where average female voice sits. And at her lowest, she was 180. But I think for the deposition, so I think she was already, I imagine, like muscle memory, I was speaking more like her. I'm better at it now because I did it for so long. It's muscle memory. And I think for her, she adapted. I think she adapted to that lower register, and it was more natural for her than it is for me. So I think during the deposition era, that's like 2017, she had already adopted that baritone that I don't think she's ever gonna be rid of. I can't imagine, but in terms of body language, she was much less commanding. I mean, she wasn't trying to change anyone's mind. There was some moments feebleness to her and vulnerability, like you said, and it was also really it was also easier to relate to her and to feel compassion for her in that setting, because she does seem like she's like kind of stripped of all that, those what do you call them, just those go-to methods of commanding attention and trying to persuade and the charisma was all just gone.
Talk to me about, I know you're probably tired of this because I imagine every interview you do talk about this, and you had to impersonate her, not only the register of her voice, but kind of the strange and interesting cadence. I actually met with her when I dropped my daughter off at Stanford. And it was sort of at the height of her celebrity status when she was on the cover of so many magazines. I had gone to the Vanity Fair conference when she was interviewed by Maria Shriver, and Maria wore a black turtleneck and a black blazer. And I was the person in the audience who raised my hand and said,
I remember that. Yeah.
Could you please explain, or at least give us an idea of the technology that allows you to diagnose a whole panoply of diseases in a tiny drop of blood. I don't know if you remember that, because I felt like then she wasn't being upfront about any of this, and it was all bells and whistles and no, where's the beef, basically. And when I went to visit her in Palo Alto, I went to her office and she sat in a room with me, and she got tears in her eyes when she told me how she wanted to help people with cancer. Of course, I think she knew that my husband had died of cancer, and I've done so much cancer advocacy work, but she seemed to care so deeply. And maybe again, that was performative for me, but she actually, I thought she was going to start crying, and it kind of made me get kind of teary.
Yeah.
And so, do you think that was real?
Ooh.
Well, or do you think that was just playing to an audience yet again?
I don't know. I want to believe. I just always want to believe the good, no matter what. Much like she wanted to believe that it was the tech was working. I want to believe that she was there with you, but I am skeptical because, she's powerful. She's powerful and she knows it. She's very smart. She's really, really smart. It's amazing. I don't know. It makes me really uncomfortable that this story makes me really uncomfortable because I'm skeptical. I wish I could say, oh God, yeah, she just wanted to save the world. And that's not to say she didn't. I don't know how with you she was. Somebody that went through it, and somebody that's like been, at the forefront of fighting this disease for so long, and all the ways you advocate. It makes me really uncomfortable. I'm sorry. I think you're amazing. And I don't know if I can say the same thing about her,
That maybe she was preying on, I think she was a master manipulator, right? And was I just another person to manipulate? Which brings me to the question, but before, I have to ask you about the voice.
Yeah.
You got rid of that pretty quickly, and there is a great trailer of you, Amanda, looking in the mirror and sort of rehearsing the voice.
This is an inspiring step forward.
And you have to do it. This is a podcast, we're crying out loud, so you have to do it.
Yeah. Well, it's really hard to get down, but it's what's actually easier is to do the accent, it's really just an affect, but it's just really the way her mouth moves, and it's hard to get back down there. I had a better time. I had an easier time doing it when I was doing ADR after I had COVID for the second time after Christmas. I was coughing so much that my register was actually much deeper, even though it's not great for my vocal cords. It was really low. Like I can't even get there right now, but it's mainly about the placement more and the way you talk. But then again, like I'm thinking of you sitting in rooms with her, which I never got to do. I would have loved to. And she would have totally, I would have connected with her. I know I would have. It would have been hard not to. And I'm so glad I didn't, because I don't think I would have been able to play her. I would have felt bad.
Well, let's talk about her, because what do you think of her? That's what I kept thinking when I've watched documentaries about her, when I watched The Dropout and your performance, when I watched how she moved in the world. First of all, how much license did the writer take? I did not listen to the podcast, I must confess, but how much license did they take in terms of her relationship with Sunny, the way she interacted with her employees? How much of that was in The Dropout, and how much did they have to create to fill in the blank spaces?
Well, the blank spaces were all very, for us, just between like how her, when she's alone, when she's making these decisions, when she's developing the voice, like that's all just imagined reality. Liz Meriwether's genius sparking brain. We enriched so much of the Sunny Elizabeth relationship, because I will say it wasn't until halfway through we were filming that we got the dump of text messages between them. And thank God they existed thank God they said what they did, because we were already on that path. Like their relationship was very confusing to people and kind of fascinating, because you knew they were tight. You knew they had a very special bond, and nobody really understood it. So we try to understand it. So that's all imagined. But in terms of the goalposts were set. I mean, there were lots of conversations that were really truly had. The way she spoke to her employees, her engineers, that was true. It's more truthful than I'd want it to be. And there were moments where I was just like, I can't believe this was said out loud.
Like what?
Behave this way, like the way she fired Ian, like it was just
He was the chief chemist for people for people who haven't watched the
yeah,
series. He was the chief chemist. He's also a cancer patient at the time, devoted to what Elizabeth
guy, yeah, the
did.
first engineer on the ground with her, really believed in her. The things she had said to Anna Areola and Avi Tavanian, who worked with Apple, she took them, they were on her board and they were helping her out. And the things that she said to them about the technology, it's just, it's almost it was hard to play certain things because I knew how real they were. And I didn't want to stop believing in her, because, as an actor, when you play somebody that you might not agree with, you still have to find the humanity. And that's the whole point of the show, really, to show the humanity, but not condone anything she did. To find the sympathy, relate, and then, watch it unfold and disagree all you want. But I think a lot of the stuff that we would never see, that she never talked about, is the things that we wrote, and that was like the fantasy in Liz Meriwether's mind. Like, how would this have made sense? What would maybe have led up to this? And then we had a lot of license to play around. And Disney, who owns Fox and Hulu, who produced it, was very, very, very on us from all legal standpoints, because, of course, it has to, she was in litigation. We have to do it right. We have to do it through the right legal channels, but it was tricky, but sadly, it's mostly true.
Well, what is your assessment, Amanda, of Elizabeth Holmes? I mean, if someone said, who is Elizabeth Holmes in your view? And, what is she all about? What would you say?
I would say Elizabeth Holmes is an incredibly smart, incredibly passionate woman who, it was in over her head. I think she, her belief led her down this path. She became very powerful because she really believed in something and she was trying to make it work. And I think that she just ended up making the wrong decisions halfway down the road. I think she got into a position where she could have taken the correct, there's incorrect and correct ways, clear, black and white at this point, at the point where I'm talking about the fork in the road, and she took the wrong way, and she doubled down. And I don't know if that's because she believed that it was still going to work, and she would do it get it done at any cost, with, lives and in the balance, and lies, or she just, says, we don't have it, give me some time. And I feel like a lot of people would be like, why didn't you just say you didn't have it? And I can't say what I can say what I would have done, but it probably would have been harder at that point that she was at. So I don't know. I really believe she had the best of intentions. I do. And with this show, it gives us a lot of context. Like, maybe these things really did happen. She wasn't great socially. Her dad lost his job at Enron, which is huge for their family. It's possible that her family was kind of withholding, and it's possible that she didn't feel like she fit in. It's possible that she she claims she was sexually assaulted in college. I mean, that's not an excuse, but that can traumatize somebody in ways that make it harder to function, and the very least. And it's hard for me to say, really. I mean, where I stand now with her is that, like, she really had the best intentions, and she made the wrong decision, and she made choices that I wish she hadn't, for the sake of a lot of people. I mean, just being irresponsible with healthcare, it's just, you can't. And if this is a lesson, or like a cautionary tale for anybody who wants to, take the shortcut in developing healthcare technology, think again. Like, science. That's why I love, in this show, what is it, episode 3, or I think episode 4, Elizabeth says to Ian, her head engineer, when she's firing him, she says, you don't understand the business. And he says, you don't understand the science. And it's just like, there it is in a nutshell. She didn't understand the science.
But I also think when you look at the origin story of Theranos, which I think the series does really well, it's not as if, at least how it's portrayed, it's not as if she came up with this idea and said, the blood industry needs to be disrupted. We need to have a better way. We need to make it easier to diagnose a whole host of diseases. It's almost as if it was the means to an end. She wanted to be this hugely successful entrepreneur, and it seems like she retrofitted this industry and tried to think of, well, I don't know, I can't explain it, but the idea didn't seem to come to her naturally. It came to her as, oh, this is my way of becoming the next Steve Jobs. It wasn't because she thought, I really want to save lives. I really want to improve healthcare. And then she kind of positioned her whole mission statement to fit this. But it came after, I'm not explaining this very well. It seems like she retrofitted this desire to be a female Steve Jobs, perhaps because her father had lost her job, perhaps because, she was looking to find her place in the world. But the idea didn't come first. The goal came first.
Absolutely.
How is she going to get there? Oh, I'm going to do this new technology with blood, right?
Yeah, in the lineage, or the
provenance.
Yeah, it almost, the time frame was just like, it's so funny, I never looked at it that way, but it is exactly how we are telling the story as well. It's just like, yeah, she was looking for the next idea. And for whatever reason, it was going to be in healthcare. because she was really into microfluidics. She was taking a course. She was still in school. And we actually show our version of her life. We show her studying and trying to come up with the next idea. And it is true that she came up with a patch that would dispense a lot of like medicines to make it easier to get medicine in. And it wasn't like Phyllis Gardner at Stanford said, it's not actually possible. Try something else. And she kept trying, and she found something else that was totally viable. Maybe not right now still, but I think she was inspired by somebody changing the world. And we wrote, Liz Merriweather wrote a line in the first episode where she's telling William H. Macy's character, Richard, that she just wants to be a billionaire someday. And it is interesting that like, that goal did come first. It did. It totally did, which doesn't, invalidate her intentions and, her the other reasonings. There could be a million reasons that you do something, but it definitely makes it harder to wrap your head around her story, like her brand story. And it is, I can't say too much because it's not out yet, but you will see, and it is kind of public knowledge, the story she keeps telling, what she tells at her TED Talk, the reasoning behind Theranos. And so it becomes, you become skeptical. It's just, there's, the more she comes up with this business, it becomes harder and harder to swallow, which is, inevitably what caused her downfall. But it is, this is why we made the show. What the fuck? How did we, as a society, allow this to happen? How do we keep allowing this to happen? To be, like our belief in something good, being really excited about something young and passionate, coming up with this amazing idea that could change the world. You want to believe it's amazing. But you see all these stories. All these con stories are all being made into TV shows and all being released in the same month, which is, didn't know that was going to happen, but but why are these all why are we making TV shows about them? Because these people existed, and these people became billionaires on an idea that wasn't super I don't know how to finish that sentence, but
proven.
How are we culpable too?
Because I think you're right. We want to believe that there are people out there who are brilliant, young, and want to disrupt the status quo for the better. But, and so you can see why people wanted that. But Elizabeth Holmes seems to be in a category all her own. What was it that would make these highly intelligent, experienced people like George Shultz or, General Mattis, or a whole host of really, Henry Kissinger, political heavyweights? It's almost like a culture clash in a way. But before we talk about that, because I think you have Elizabeth herself, and then you have Silicon Valley and disruption and entrepreneurs kind of as the backdrop for the story. But let me ask you first, how was Elizabeth Holmes able to convince, persuade, manipulate super intelligent, experienced people like George Shultz and Henry Kissinger and General Mattis to invest in her company? That to me is just astounding. How did she do it?
I think it's just because she was young and hungry and passionate, and she had a great idea.
But do you think it was also how much did her appearance play into it?
Oh, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's a whole other, investigation into gender roles and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't believe that if she had been a man with those guys, I don't know.
Or an unattractive woman. I hate to say it. I mean, I think she obviously used her.
She knew what she looked like.
Yeah.
She knew what she looked like. And I think she was able to maneuver some care and some, interest very, very, very quickly.
It was interesting to watch George Schultz, played by Sam Waterston, just get all googly eyed around. She clearly bamboozled him by, thank you for sharing that story with me. That was really profound, or whatever she said to him, and to see him sort of fall for her. But it was weird because it was not overt sexuality.
No.
I don't know what it was. How did she do it? And why did they do it? I don't think I'll ever understand that.
I feel like there's gotta be a level of FOMO with them. They're so much older. They're not in the tech world. Like, all of her investors weren't tech investors. They weren't Silicon Valley investors. No VC wanted to go with her because they know better. And it's because healthcare is really hard. I mean, when she says, Mark Zuckerberg said, move fast and break things. Yeah, that totally works when you're in the tech, but not biotech. I mean, like, not human beings, like health. She was using certain templates in the wrong places. And in her template, it was get a lot of very powerful people in government to invest, and then the rest will follow. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, that's another thing. I was watching, Michael Showalter directed the first 4 episodes of The Dropout. He also directed The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which, God willing, Jessica Chastain will get her Oscar for this year. I was curious. I actually looked over at my husband when we were watching it, when Andrew Garfield drives up in the car with his new car. She's like, we can't afford this car. And he's like, fake till you make it. And sorry, but like, her whole trajectory was faking it until she made it. Getting the security guards just for that aura, just to, if people, a lot of people in our show, or a lot of characters in our show would say, well, she has all this security. I mean, they must be protecting something real. And it's actually, no, you just do a lot of, you build up around you, and then people will believe whatever you tell them.
It's so true. She had kind of the accoutrements, because when I met her, I walked out with her and she got into this big fancy car to be driven home. And I was like, wow, she's really all that in a bag of chips. Like, this woman is a mogul, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think it automatically, psychologically makes you think, well, there's got to be some there if all of this is around her. And I think she was brilliant at appearances. But it's interesting that you say FOMO, because I think that is so perceptive, because George Schultz says, I'm 99 years old, or however old he was.
Yeah, 90.
Was he 90? He said, George Schultz said, I'm 90 years old. Yeah. And she says, what a vibrant 90-year-old he is, or something. And I think it is this clash of old established business practices and success coming up against this brash new generation of entrepreneurs. And I think that makes people feel old, entrenched, and, as my daughter would say, chuggy. And I think it's so well illustrated with the Walgreens guy,
Yeah.
right? You have the, I guess, chief medical operator or whatever he was. He's played so brilliantly by the guy from Ferris Bueller. What's his name, Amanda?
Alan Ruck. Alan Ruck.
Alan Ruck. And it's so clear that this character, this man, was going through kind of almost a professional midlife crisis, if you will, listening to Katy Perry, singing that song. What is that?
Baby, I'm a firework. I don't know what the song's called.
Did you ever feel like a paper bag or like a plastic bag or whatever the words are? I should know this, but floating. And this guy just wants to be a part of the action. He wants to be where business is going. And, I think with all these business pressures, that some of these people saw her as this almost messianic figure who was going to transform industry for the better, and not really necessarily, thinking about improving healthcare, but improving the bottom line, right?
Yes. I mean,
I thought that episode was so funny because it was so, I don't know, the whole thing just cracked me up because I think the title of the episode is Old White Men.
Yeah. I do wonder if is this how things get done? I mean, that's how it got done. Not necessarily exactly how, of course we don't know if there, this guy stopped the car to talk to Wade McQuillan from Walgreens, but it's still, Walgreens did open Theranos blood testing centers, wellness centers in like 84 locations in Arizona and California. Like, it got that far. So you wonder, like, what's happening? Like, how much is getting through the cracks? I mean, if this can get through the cracks, and that's how I keep coming back to like us being culpable as a culture, as a society, like wanting to believe at what cost, and if there's enough egos.
I was going to say the E word because it was clearly also driven by ego, the idea that she might go to CVS.
Oh my God. And that really happened. It happened like that. Apparently it happened like that. I'll say apparently, but I'm pretty sure that's exactly what happened. She came down and said something about how far the drive would be when she lands. And they were like, that's CVS. And then she didn't go. She wasn't going anywhere. She was playing it because she's a genius, and not for the better, just to get somebody behind because she needed to stay on the board. And I very, 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 very smart. And so,
well, in an almost evil way, because it was such a mind fuck, excuse my French listeners, but she played, that's all right. She played these mind games with these people, and Sunny did too. And
keeping everybody separate,
right?
That was a tactic. Keeping everybody in their separate little zones, different labs, to keep people from talking about what they were doing, but more importantly, what they weren't doing. That's a mind game. Just
even taking the Walgreens executives, putting off the opportunity to actually see the labs, see the science, look at the machines, inviting them to this sushi restaurant where they clearly felt uncomfortable. They could barely figure out how to sit in the chairs or sit at the table.
Yeah, that was all there. It was so fun. I mean, I don't know when that meeting happened, but in our show, it was it's the funniest getting those guys together. They're just like Laurel and Hardy, four of them. They're like the Three Stooges. They're just so good together. But I feel like it's a pretty good depiction of what must have happened, because for them to reach the conclusion that they were going to invest in Theranos, sorry, but some of that had to have happened.
Even the mind game of taking them to a restaurant that and they're standing outside and don't order teriyaki, and they're trying so hard to be hip and,
Right. Yeah.
cool. And so it was that to me, she played on that she was this really cutting edge person in every aspect of her life. And this aspirational figure that made other people feel less than. And that was part of her psychology, I think, don't you?
I mean, I I can assume a lot of, that's the thing, like without having really felt my way inside of her, you know what I mean? I feel like that's definitely what could have been happening in her head. That's why I thought this, like some other stories, maybe not as necessary, but to make into like a fictional show. I thought it was necessary for me to be an audience member watching the show because I wanted to know what it could have been like inside of her head. And then like being able to play her, I really, really cared. Like I really wanted there to be something good in there.
What is good about Elizabeth Holmes?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. People say, so what do you think about her? And I'm like, I don't really know her. I spent, 7 months of my life playing a version of her, my version of her. But she's a real human being and she's out there walking around with a baby and a family. And I'm like, I have no idea what she could possibly be thinking because of all the things that she's done, all the things she put into play that are really hard to watch and really hard to understand and really hard to excuse. She's also a real person. So I think what's good about her is that she was really what's a good word, not determined, but
Committed?
yeah, she was very disciplined and got a lot done. She was just, I don't know, she was passionate. I guess that's a good. But what do you do with it when you have that passion? Like it's all about what you do with it. It's all about the journey.
But it's
And
also what motivates that passion, right?
yeah,
And that to me is still a gigantic question mark.
that's the thing. Like, what was she afraid of? That's it. I think in our story, she cared about her parents and she was afraid of failing them. And she was in there's a lot of heartbreaking scenes between my version and our parents in the show, and things that can kind of color her world a little bit and make the question mark not as big in terms of motivation. But now I was able to relate to her because she's also like a contemporary of mine. We, were a little socially awkward in school. We were on the dance team. We, listened to probably some of the same music. Like that was the easy stuff to relate to. But the rest of it, as more stuff came to light, it's just so hard to. It's hard to think about the things that are good. But I think there's got to be something, right? Or is that just what I want to believe? Because I really wanted her. I don't know. I do, like, there's a part of me that wishes her well. And I think that's also because I know she's going to have to be held responsible. I mean, she's been held responsible and she's going to have to pay the price for all that. And I think it would be harder to swallow any of this if things had gone differently in the trial. It's also tricky. it's all so tricky because we don't know, but also there are things that we do know. So maybe it shouldn't be so tricky.
What role do you think Sunny Balwani played in this? I mean, he was clearly a very controlling guy, but he almost seems emasculated in the Dropout in some way.
Yeah. I
Seems
mean,
like her
yeah.
her sort of accomplice, but that she's really
She's in
seems to be
control.
running the show, right?
Sorry, but I think she was in control.
Really?
I do. I mean, she was in control of her company. He was never in control of her company. But she alleges a lot of things went down between them at home. He's gonna have a chance to defend himself at trial, which I think starts like this week. I'm really interested in hearing what he has to say because we've not heard from him, and we obviously weren't allowed to talk to him either, which was a bummer. But this guy's, and he seems to be feeling himself in terms of like the text mess. I mean the text messages between them, but also like his public tweets. The text message between them shows that he was a leader in a lot of ways for her. Like she saw it, like she got solace from him, but I think he was just in love with her and would do anything for her, and was really hard and did the spanking for her, the quote unquote spanking, yelling at, he had a temper apparently, and Naveen Andrews so beautifully portrays that in his version of Sunny. And I don't know, that was, I think that, I don't know what he's gonna say, but I know she talked a lot about abuse. I don't know what his defense is gonna be or his response to that is gonna be, but it's a lot muddier, I think, than we'll ever know. I mean, the text messages they're like, there's some passion in there. And there's also like desperation in there. And I think there's a lot of codependency. I played it that way. I mean, he had the money in the beginning for sure, but he loved her. I don't know if she ever loved him. I don't know.
How much do you think the fact that she said she was sexually assaulted her first year at Stanford, how much of that was an impetus to drop out and to start Theranos? I know the show Liz took it very seriously, right?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly can't imagine being able to move. I don't know how I've been so lucky to not have had to deal with that, but I don't know. I don't know if I don't know. That's what I would want to ask her. I want to know what she, how she was able to overcome that. Like, because she says to her mom in the show, that's not why. She says, is this because? And she's like, no. But I can't see how that couldn't play into it somehow. Like the effect that could have on your life. I don't know.
I wonder if Elizabeth Holmes will ever tell her own story. So much has been written about her.
She should. Like she should. And also like, will she see the Dropout? I don't know if she should. I don't think she should watch the show. I really don't. I mean, we made up a lot of it is imagined reality. It's a TV show. And it doesn't hold it's not, there's some sympathy in some ways, but it's not, we're telling the story. We're not lying about anything. The goalposts are set. She set them herself, but I don't think she should see it. I don't know. Who is this person? I think she should. I mean, everybody deserves to have a chance to speak their minds, right? Maybe she's waiting to write a memoir. Like, wouldn't we all love to know from her perspective? I mean, we're trying to get some perspective here on the show for fans of her story, but and some like motivational, yeah, some of the motivations behind her choices, like what she could have been thinking. But I want to read that book. I want her to be the narrator of her own book.
But do you think we'll ever hear the real story if it's from her perspective, or she'll continue to manipulate an audience? Will we ever get to know the real Elizabeth Holmes, I guess is the question.
Maybe we're not meant to. Maybe that's just one of life's like questions. I think it's going to come down to, I can tell you for sure she's inventing something new right now. I don't think you can stop her. And so maybe we'll never understand that kind of drive.
But do you think we're going to be hearing about a Theranos 2.0 or some kind of facsimile thereof?
Something. I am 99% sure that she will invent something. She will come up with something. I don't know if it's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be vaporware or not, but I don't think nobody can stop her. I think her brain's still clicking away, and we can't take away her intelligence. I mean, she is, yeah, but I also I just can't relate to that drive. Yes, changing the world for the better, saving the world, sure. My brain doesn't work that way, but I'm all for supporting it. So let's see what she comes up with next. This isn't whether or not she spends time in prison for the things she's been convicted of. I don't think prison will stop her either, Do
you think she should go to prison? I mean, she hasn't been sentenced yet, right?
Sentenced in September. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it would be tough if she didn't, just because of what that would say in terms of these kinds of crimes. I think the way it goes is that you spend time in prison if you're convicted, and you spend a certain amount of years. I think if she didn't, I mean, listen, I'm a mother, she has a child like that. I think about the child, but I also think what message is that sending if she doesn't have to spend any time to the rest of the world and the rest of the people that are spending time in prison for things that for lesser crimes, I want fair. I want things to be fair. And so there was something about her being convicted that made me think, okay, she's being held responsible, which is so important. Just from my perspective, my own sanity, I want someone to, if they've been, to be held responsible for the things that they've done wrong. It's always been important to me. So I don't know what it entails though. I don't know how long I don't know. I'm sure she's wondering too, what does that look like? I got to go to work every day and play this enigma. And then I got to go home to my family, So it was interesting to walk around in her shoes for a minute. And I don't envy her, and I hope she comes up with something that does save the world. Because we all love a comeback, don't we?